He used to say I was lucky he put up with me, that I was too emotional, too tired, too much, while he gave nothing and took everything. I worked 2 jobs so he could find himself. I missed funerals, birthdays, even my own health, just to keep our lives afloat. And every time I asked for help, he'd sneer, "What do you even do that's so hard?" My love was his lifeline, his comfort, his convenience, and still, he made me feel like the burden. But the night I found myself sobbing on the bathroom floor, holding the dinner I'd cooked untouched on the stove, I finally asked the question that changed everything. What if I gave everything to someone who never even saw me? That was the moment the fog lifted, and I saw the truth. He didn't break me. I handed him the pieces, but not anymore. My name is Lena Moore, and this is the moment I stopped surviving for someone else and started living for me. I was the girl they warned not to speak, the one they rolled their eyes at, whispered about in corners, and pretended didn't belong. But that night, when I stood at the podium, I didn't speak for them. I spoke for every person who's ever been made to feel small. And when I finished, the room stood. And they, my own family, couldn't even look at me, introducing me. My name is Rachel Ward, and I've always been the quiet one at family gatherings, the one who poured the wine, fetched the napkins, and was told I was too sensitive when I tried to speak up. My older sister Dana, the doctor, my brother Eli, the financial genius, and me, just Rachel, the one who worked with words, not scalpel or stocks. To them, that was always less. I was raised in a family where success had a script. You go Ivy League, you dress a certain way, you marry someone polished, you keep your voice tidy and your passions quiet. I didn't fit that mold. I chose literature, spoken word, writing, expression. I was the odd one, the artsy one, the why can't you just get a real job one. So when the Regional Arts Council invited me to speak at their annual gala, one that my parents and their snobbish circle happened to sponsor, I was ecstatic. It was the first public acknowledgement of my work. But when I told my parents, their reaction wasn't pride. It was panic. The whisper. "You're going to speak?" my mother asked, one brow arched, her voice tight. "Yes," I said, smiling. I was chosen to close the night. They exchanged glances, those silent, condescending looks that communicated more than words ever could. "Just don't embarrass us," my father muttered as he adjusted his cufflinks. Dana smirked behind her wineglass. Eli didn't even look up from his phone. I swallowed hard. I told myself it didn't matter, but it did. Because that whisper, it wasn't just about them. It was about me, about every time I'd been made to feel like the afterthought, the extra, the one they apologized for in small ways, like introducing me as Rachel, she's kind of a writer, instead of just owning my work. Flashback to childhood, brief emotional context. Growing up, I was always creative, drawing, performing poems at the dinner table, inventing stories. I once won a citywide writing contest in 8th grade. I remember racing home, breathless with excitement, and showing the certificate to my parents. "Nice," Mom said, barely glancing at it. "Now finish your homework." When Dana won the science fair the year before, we had a cake, a party, balloons. That was the rhythm of my childhood. Celebrations for some, silence for me. So when I stepped onto that stage, clutching my note cards and trembling with nerves, I didn't just want to speak well, I needed to, not for them, but for the girl inside me who'd always been overlooked. Setting the night. The venue was breathtaking. Golden chandeliers, velvet curtains, an auditorium packed with writers, professors, philanthropists, and city officials. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I spotted my parents in the 3rd row. Dana sat poised beside them, her husband whispering something into her ear that made her chuckle. My name was announced. Applause. I walked to the stage. A single microphone. A deep breath. But then I saw her. In the second to last row. An older woman, eyes wet, clutching a printed-out copy of my latest essay. I didn't know her, but I knew her soul, because my words had touched it. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked straight ahead, and I began. The first few lines of my speech were like stepping onto thin ice. I wasn't sure if the crowd would laugh, sigh, or simply tune out. But they didn't. They listened. Not politely, not out of obligation, but deeply, genuinely. I opened with a story about my first rejection letter from a local journal that told me my voice lacked clarity. I was 17. It crushed me. But I didn't stop writing. Then I told them about the time I performed. A spoken word piece at a bookstore to an audience of 5, and one of those 5 was a man sleeping in the back. The room laughed gently. I smiled, then continued. I spoke about invisibility, about what it's like to grow up in a family where you're loved but never quite liked, where success is measured by titles and numbers and everything else is fluff. The shift in the room. By the time I got to the part where I said, I used to think my words weren't enough, but now I know they were just too much for the wrong ears, something shifted. I could see it on their faces, eyes glassy, heads nodding, lips pressed tight. And when I paused to breathe, they waited for me. They didn't rush me, they waited. Even the board chair, a stern-looking man who hadn't smiled all night, leaned forward, elbows on knees. I saw people exchanging glances, not in amusement, but in recognition. And it hit me. These weren't just listeners, they were witnesses. My family's reactions, but not everyone was moved. From the stage, I caught glimpses of my family. My father shifted in his seat, jaw clenched. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My mother's expression was unreadable, stoic, arms crossed. Dana rolled her eyes at one point. Eli stared at his phone like it was the only light in the room. I could have let that sink me. But I didn't. Because every time I wanted to stop, I remembered the girl in the back with my essay in her hand. The elderly couple in the front row, clutching each other's hands, the young woman in the aisle seat, nodding with silent tears. They were my people now. The closing. I ended with a story about my grandmother. She was the only one who encouraged my love for stories. She'd sneak me books under the dinner table, whispering, "Write it how you feel it." She died before she ever heard me perform, so I ended my speech with her words. Write it how you feel it, because someone, somewhere, will finally feel it too. Then I stepped back from the mic, and for a second, there was silence, just breath. Then, one clap, two, then more. And suddenly, the room was on its feet. A full, thunderous, standing ovation. The moment of power. I stood frozen for a second, my heart a mess of disbelief and wonder. People were smiling up at me, clapping hard, some even whistled. Strangers. I saw the woman with my essay wipe her eyes and mouth the word, "Thank you." It should have been the happiest moment of my life. And in a way, it was. But my eyes instinctively drifted to the third row. My father wasn't clapping. Neither was my mother. Dana had that bitter smile, the kind that says, "Sure, enjoy it, it won't last." And Eli, he was recording. Not the ovation. Me. I stepped off the stage slowly, applause still ringing. But something inside me had already changed. For the first time, I had nothing to prove to them. But that didn't mean the night was over. Because once the speeches ended and the mingling began, they cornered me. And what they said next? That was the moment I realized this wasn't just jealousy. It was fear. Fear that I might finally matter. And that meant they didn't get to define me anymore. They didn't even wait for the crowd to thin. As I stepped down from the stage, still flushed from the applause, Dana intercepted me like a heat-seeking missile in stilettos. "Seriously?" she hissed through clenched teeth, her perfect smile still plastered on for anyone watching. "What was that?" I blinked. "A speech?" She leaned in. "You made us sound like villains." I looked past her to see my mother slowly making her way toward us, face tight with anger masked in practiced grace. Dad wasn't far behind, face red and stiff, and Eli still recording from his phone like this was a courtroom deposition. The family intervention. "Rachel," my mother said, in that voice she always used when I embarrassed her in public. "Do you have any idea how inappropriate that was? These people know us." "Exactly," I said. "And now they know me." My father cut in, his tone sharp and cold. "You took a personal opportunity and turned it into a family indictment. You should have stuck to poetry." For a moment, the hurt burned, deep and fast. But then, something strange happened. Didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. Instead, I breathed in and said, "I told the truth." And the silence that followed was almost comical. Their biggest fear. Exposure. "You've always been dramatic," Dana muttered, glancing around like she expected someone to swoop in and agree with her. "You think it's noble, Rachel?" My mother snapped. "Turning your upbringing into a sob story so strangers will clap for you? You humiliated this family." I stepped back. I didn't name anyone. I didn't accuse. I shared my experience. That's what artists do. Or am I only allowed to speak when I'm saying things that make you look good? Dad let out a bitter laugh. "You're twisting everything." "No," I said. "I'm unraveling it." That was the difference. For the first time in my life, I was pulling the thread and letting the truth breathe. And that terrified them. Because as long as I stayed silent, they stayed perfect. Flashback, the ways they silenced me. I thought of all the times they'd done this, minimized me. When I tried to read a poem at a cousin's graduation and my mom said, "This isn't about you." When I asked for help publishing my first chapbook and Dana offered me her old printer like I was a child stapling flyers. When I brought a boyfriend to Thanksgiving and Dad grilled him for being just a teacher. They never shouted. They dismissed, quiet erosion, polite silencing. But tonight, I'd undone that. The public facade cracks. "People came up to us," my mom continued. "They asked if your speech was about us. What were we supposed to say?" "Maybe yes," I said. "And then ask yourselves why it resonated." Dana scoffed. "You think a standing ovation means you're suddenly better than us?" "No," I said softly. "It means I don't need your permission anymore." That was when Dad raised, his voice, just slightly, but enough for people nearby to notice. "You've always had a chip on your shoulder, Rachel. Maybe if you spent less time whining and more time working." I cut him off calmly. "You think writing isn't work? That storytelling doesn't move people? Because that's exactly what happened tonight. And not one of you could stand it." He stared at me. For the first time, I stared back without flinching. The turning point. Eli's video. Eli cleared his throat. "I recorded the whole speech," he said, a little too smug. "Thought I'd upload it, maybe tag you. You're welcome." But something about his tone made me pause. I realized he didn't record it out of support. He wanted ammo. I gave a tight smile. "Go ahead, let the world hear it." Because here's the truth. If your truth embarrasses people, maybe they needed to be embarrassed. The moment passed. They drifted away, each one fuming in their own way. I stood there, clutching the note card still in my hand, a little stunned. But I wasn't ashamed. Not anymore. I turned toward the bar, ready to get some water, when a woman I'd never met touched my arm. Her voice trembled. "Your speech? It gave me the courage to leave someone who's been making me feel invisible for years." I smiled, because in that moment, I realized I hadn't just spoken for myself. I'd spoken for her too. And for the first time, that was enough. I woke up the next morning to 3 missed calls from Eli and a text from Dana that read, "You should probably check your socials." I hadn't even thought to check. After the gala, I'd gone home, kicked off my heels, and sat in the dark with a mug of tea and a heart still thudding from adrenaline. I had felt something close to peace, for the first time in years, but peace didn't last long, because when I opened Instagram, my notifications were exploding. The video goes public. Eli had done it. He uploaded the full speech with the caption, "My sister's artsy little moment at last night's event. She's dramatic as ever. Enjoy." At first glance, it was meant to mock. But the internet didn't take it that way. Within hours, thousands of views. By morning, tens of thousands. By lunch, close to 200K. Comments poured in. "I don't know this woman, but I am this woman. Crying in my office horn. Thank you for this. Can someone publish this as an essay? She speaks for so many of us. Who's her publisher? I want the book." And then came the messages, emails, DMs, from strangers, readers, even small publications asking to reprint excerpts. Dana's reaction. Dana called me at noon, not to congratulate, but to warn. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I laughed, almost kindly. "You mean people liked it?" "I mean, you're acting like you're some sort of icon now. You wrote a sob story and got lucky that it hit a nerve." I wanted to say something. I did, but I stopped myself. Because I realized something. They had always been terrified of me telling the truth, not because it wasn't real, but because it was. And now, people believed me. Flashback, the silencing tactic. I remembered being 17 again. I had written an essay about our family for my college application. I was proud of it. Honest, raw, complicated. I left it on the printer, and my dad found it. He didn't yell. He simply walked into my room and said, "Rewrite this. You don't want strangers thinking poorly of us, do you?" I rewrote it, and I got in. But I never felt like the version they accepted was really me. Now, the world sees me, and so do I. Now, thousands of strangers did see me, the real me, not Rachel the quiet one, not the girl who tiptoed around Dana's shadow or handed the mic back to others, not the one who filtered herself at dinner. No, the girl who stood on that stage and bared her soul. She was finally mine, and I wasn't giving her up again. The email that changed everything. That afternoon, an email came through that made me sit up straight. Subject, "We saw your speech, let's talk." It was from a senior editor at a publishing house. She'd seen the video. She loved the voice. She wanted to know if I had more essays, a manuscript, even a concept. My fingers trembled as I replied. I did. I had years of journals, short pieces, essays no one ever read because I was always told they weren't marketable. Now suddenly, they were powerful. They were wanted. Their panic turns to possession. Later that evening, Eli texted me again. "You should tag me in the video. I'm the one who made it go viral, LOL. No, sorry. No, you were amazing. Just another attempt to control the story." Then a call from Mom. "I saw the numbers. It's everywhere. Don't let it go to your head." I smiled as she said it. Because the woman I was becoming, she didn't need their approval anymore. She had a voice, and more importantly, she had ears that finally wanted to hear it. That night, I sat at my desk, opened a fresh document, and wrote the title. Things I wasn't allowed to say. And I began because I wasn't done speaking. Not even close. A week passed. By then, the video had crossed 1 million views. The publishing house offered me a contract for a memoir collection. Real stories, essays, pieces that had lived in my drawer for too long. They wanted my voice, unfiltered. The public loved it. But my family? They went silent. Not in the way that says, "We're giving space," but the kind of silence that means they're plotting how to regain control. Until one night, I hosted a small salon at a local bookstore to celebrate the speech's impact. It was intimate. Readings, Q&A, soft music, community. And they showed up. Uninvited. The unexpected family. Support. I was mid-reading when I noticed them entering. Dana first, dressed like she was crashing a board meeting instead of a bookstore event. Then Mom and Dad, all polite smiles and controlled stares. Eli was behind them, of course, phone in hand again, filming. It knocked the air out of me for a second. I had carefully crafted this event to feel safe, honest, mine. And here they were, walking in like they'd been part of it all along. The audience clapped when I finished, and someone asked about my next steps. As I spoke, I saw my mother nodding in the front row like she was somehow proud, like she hadn't told me, "Don't embarrass us." The conversation after the event. When it ended, people came up to talk, shake hands, ask questions. I tried to avoid them, my family, but they waited. And as the crowd thinned, Mom stepped forward. "We're proud of you," she said, all warmth and sugar. I blinked. "Are you?" Dana chimed in. "You've really made a name for yourself. So unexpected, honestly." I bit my tongue. Dad followed, putting a hand on my shoulder. "We'd love to host a little family dinner, celebrate properly." It took everything in me not to laugh. A week ago, I was a liability. Now I was suddenly a trophy? I looked at them, one by one, the same people who made me question myself for years, the same voices that said my truth was too much, that I was too dramatic, too emotional, too embarrassing. Now, they wanted to align themselves with me. A conversation that changed everything. "I don't think that's necessary," I said calmly. Mom frowned. "Rachel, you're letting this go to your head." "No," I said. "I'm letting it go to my heart. For once." Dana folded her arms. "So you're just cutting us off now?" I stepped back. "I'm not cutting you off. I'm just not letting you rewrite my story anymore." Dad gave me the look. The one he always gave when he couldn't win, but still wanted to remind me of my place. "Be careful. You don't want to seem ungrateful." And that's when I said it, the sentence that changed the tone entirely. "I'm not ungrateful. I'm finally free, and that scares the hell out of you." The masks slip, their smiles dropped. No more pretend. Dana's face went red. "You're so full of yourself now." Mom's voice turned cold. "You'll regret this, Rachel. Family is all you have." I looked around. At the crowd still lingering, waiting to say goodbye. At the stacks of books I'd donated. The local writers hugging each other. The girl in the corner, no older than 15, clutching a notebook and waiting for me to sign it. "No," I said softly. "Family is who shows up and sees you, even when you're inconvenient." And with that, I walked away. That night, I signed a copy of one of my printed pieces for the girl in the corner. She told me her parents don't listen either, but she's working on a book of poems. "You should read one at school," I said. She looked up, uncertain. "I don't want to embarrass them." I smiled and whispered the only thing that felt right. "Embarrass them with your brilliance." Because I had learned something they never wanted me to know. Their shame wasn't mine to carry. And their approval? I never needed it to begin with. 6 months later, I stood backstage at the city's largest performing arts center. Not a bookstore, not a local gala, a national literary summit. I was the keynote speaker. The woman once told not to embarrass anyone was now listed beside Pulitzer winners and best-selling authors. My book, Things I Wasn't Allowed to Say, had hit the non-fiction bestseller list 3 weeks earlier. But it wasn't just the fame or the numbers that made the moment surreal. It was the fact that this time I didn't invite my family. The backlash I never expected and didn't need to fear. After I stopped engaging with them publicly, the passive-aggressive messages turned more bitter. Eli posted a sarcastic Instagram story captioned, "If you don't turn your trauma into profit, are you even a real writer?" Dana sent me an email pretending to check on me, but subtly accusing me of vilifying the family for personal gain. Mom asked if she could attend my book launch. I told her gently, "It's not a space for performance." I expected guilt. I expected backlash. But instead, what came was peace. Real, earned, solid peace. I didn't owe them an audience. Not anymore. Backstage, before the biggest speech of my life. As I waited for my name to be called, I held a small, worn piece of paper in my hand. My original poem from high school. The one I wrote after that first rejection letter. The one I'd never shown anyone. Back then, I wrote, "They don't see me now, but I will be the sound that rattles glass In rooms they said I couldn't enter. I smiled, because that's exactly where I was now. On the other side of the glass. Stepping on stage one last time. I walked into a storm of applause. The lights hit me, warm and steady. A sea of strangers, all of them ready to listen, and I told them the truth again. I talked about erasure, about being told to keep it down, not rock the boat, not air the dirty laundry. And then I said, if your truth makes them squirm, it's probably the one worth telling. The crowd erupted, and I didn't flinch this time. I didn't search the audience for approval that would never come, because this moment was mine. A letter from someone unexpected. The next morning, I got a handwritten letter from my grandmother's old friend, someone I hadn't seen in years. She had watched the live stream. In her letter, she wrote, "Your grandmother always said you'd be the one to break the silence. She said, Rachel may whisper now, but one day her words will be too loud for the world to ignore." I cried, not because I was sad, but because someone had believed in me long before I believed in myself. The final chapter, me unfiltered. Now, I write full-time. I speak at schools, shelters, retreats, and every time someone thanks me for saying what they've never had the courage to admit out loud, I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I'm not the black sheep. I'm the blueprint, not the shame of the family, but the truth that freed me from it. They told me not to embarrass them, so I told the truth. And it was never embarrassment. It was exposure. And I am not sorry. Not even a little.